Hello! Welcome to Levels Plus Whenever, episode 80. Wow, 80 of these. Not Street Fighter 6. That's still coming. I need to redo the entire shoot for the story mode. I've played more of it, and there's a little bit more I want to do before I actually record the whole Street Fighter 6 thing. So that'll be coming next time, I promise. But there was some pretty big news. It's capitalistic that I need to talk about. So we'll do that today. Very fun. Before we actually do that, though, you probably have noticed that the resolution of the video is different. It's like I got edges here, and instead of like at the very edge of the screen. And I was running into encoder problems, and I was just getting tired of recording things per minute. That actually is what happened with the last video, is I could record about a minute before the encoder got overloaded, and then I had to stop and start over. And that was one reason why that video was so short. I was just getting tired of arguing with the OBS software. So we're going to use this format from now on for face cam stuff. It's not as high resolution, but I do like the colors. The color dynamic is really nice. So I think it's not as high quality, but it's at least a decent compromise, and the encoder is not giving me gripes. I just recorded a Smash wishlist video and had no problems. It was great. So, what's the news that's so capitalistic? To Polygon, covering the PlayStation Plus price hike. Whew. Suddenly relevant to me because I just got a PS5. And one of the things I have not done with Street Fighter 6 is play online, because you have to pay for it. And Sony pretty much guaranteed that's not going to happen for anytime soon. So, beginning in September, we're going to see a price hike. And here they are, right here. So, it used to be $60 just to get the essential plan for 12 months. Now it's $79.99. Used to be $99.99 for the extra, which allowed you to play games through its service. Now it's $134.99. And then the premium, which adds classic games among a few other bonuses, went from $119.99 to $159.99 a year. Sony claims that this has to happen because it's too expensive to run the service if they don't. And that is crap. Because Sony is not just doing video games. They have their fingers in many other things. So, to me, this is just garbage. And a lot of people that I've read agree with me. And this pretty much confirms I will not be paying Sony for online. So a whole slew of the games I got, I will never put online. I'm not going to play Street Fighter 6, King of Fighters 15, Guilty Gear Strive online. I'm not going to be able to do anything with online multiplayer unless it's something like Fall Guys, which I have no interest in. Games that have basically pay for that server cost themselves. And it's shocking how much of an increase this is. A $40 increase just to play PS1 and PS2 games, cloud storage, a couple other things. It makes no sense to me. It's not worth it to pay $160 a year so I can play Wild Arms without paying for it. Because I already am paying for it. A lot of people gripe about Nintendo, and I think some of those gripes are justified. I do feel that at times the $60 for their premium service is questionable, but you know, their classics catalog, at the very least, despite the trickle that it is better than the drip that Sony has been doing since they launched this year. There's very little on there to get excited about, in contrast to the PS3 store lineup of classics for PS1 and PS2. They got a long way to go, and they're not in a hurry at all. And given Jim Ryan is the president of Sony Entertainment Interactive, or Interactive Entertainment, or whatever their name is, I don't see that changing, because Jim Ryan has been very on record about not finding the retro element of their history worth preserving. So the fact that that is a very low priority for them is very apparent. I do wish that Nintendo was more frequent, but you know, at this point, between the N64, the Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, NES, Super Nintendo, Genesis, they at least have one thing a month, typically, now. One update for one of those. So, they're doing okay. They could be more aggressive about getting games onto the service, but again, I think that they're not in the biggest hurry, and companies are more than happy to release retro content on their own, which I'm okay with. In Sony's case, they've got a fair amount of retro re-releases that third parties have done, but they've got a pretty good legacy of their own that they're not doing much with. So it's unfortunate, and this particular change is not helping. Not helping their case at all. So that's a thumbs down from me, Sony. That is not what you should be doing. Well, on the topic of companies doing really bad things, I don't talk about Embracer Group much on here, and if I do, it's usually with an incredible swap of sarcasm, because I hate them. But I feel like I should explain a little bit about that, because they are in trouble, and they could have big ramifications for a lot of things that they've acquired, because they're in trouble. So what prompts this? Well, we'll go back to Polygon. They decided to shut down Volition, the studio that started as the creators of Descent back in the 90s, but are probably best known for Saints Row. And they were part of Deep Silver. And Deep Silver is one of the companies that got swallowed up into Embracer Group when they decided to do that, and they could not figure out what to do with Volition or Saints Row. They tried Agents of Mayhem, a spin-off that just didn't really connect, and then they tried to reboot Saints Row last year and failed, because they lost the point of why people wanted to play Saints Row. What's the problem with Embracer on the whole? Well, let's go back a few years. Embracer Group originates as Nordic Games. Nordic Games is a Polish-based company that basically did stuff in Europe. But when THQ died, they saw an opportunity to expand and became THQ Nordic, and acquired a lot of what THQ had in its dockets. And then eventually got Koch Media, which owned Deep Silver, and in the last 2 years have been on a frenzy of acquisitions. So some of the ones that I remember off of the top of my head is they bought Limited Run Games. They bought Dark Horse Comics. They bought Asmodee, which is a board game company. They bought the rights to Lord of the Rings in terms of not the film rights, but practically everything else. They bought Crystal Dynamics and Eidos from Square Enix. So they own Tomb Raider. They own Deus Ex. They own Thief. They don't own Gex, apparently. Which was a Crystal Dynamics property, but apparently that just didn't make the transfer. There's a bunch of other stuff that they have purchased. I can't remember it all. Problem is that Nordic Games, in its origin, had some pretty Gamergate-related connections and went on 8chan to do a AMA. And 8chan, for those who don't know, is probably one of the absolute worst cesspools of the dark internet. And if you don't know what the dark internet is, you can't search it, basically, but it exists. It is out there. And things that are really despicable and depraved happen in the dark internet. And 8chan is among the worst of the worst. And I don't want to say why, because it's so inhumane and cruel and disgusting that I don't really want to verbalize it. But if you really want to know, I'll share a link to an article about the THQ Nordic 8chan AMA, and you can discover things you wish you didn't actually discover in that process. They never really apologized for doing that, and very shortly thereafter became Embracer Group. Probably to distance themselves from that very bad PR move. Well, Embracer Group has been buying up stuff for a couple years now, and they had a very big transaction bottom out on them about April, May of this year. It was a $2 billion deal. And it is pretty widely suspected that this was an attempt to sell the entire enterprise to another company. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the PC display. Kotaku did some reporting, and following an Axios report that Embracer's $2 billion deal that exploded in their face was with Saudi Arabia. Yep, the Savvy Games Group. That is operated by the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. Who? That's kind of falls in line, honestly, with the 8chan thing, to be completely honest with you. That it just makes sense. This company has very few morals, and it's unfortunate how much Savvy Games Group has permeated the industry. They own a lot of stock, basically majority own SNK, and that makes it hard at times to be interested in what SNK is doing because of the association. Savvy Games Group owns a pretty good amount of shares in many companies, including Nintendo, including Activision Blizzard, including Capcom, including you could just go for days with how many things the Saudi investment group has shoved their money into. They're all over the video game industry. It's almost impossible to ignore. But Embracer Group was working with them for a $2 billion deal allegedly. And it was pretty much finalized, which is why Embracer was buying all this stuff. And then they walked away. Embracer's held with a lot of stuff that they can't afford because they don't have $2 billion they were expecting. So Volition died because of this. People lost their jobs because of this, because Embracer decided to mess around and find out, to use a more politically correct term. And it's just another indicator of how boned the game industry can be. That you have a job, and then you don't. And we've been seeing this time and time again, especially in the games press. Over and over and over again, sudden layoffs appear for no reason beyond we don't have the money, supposedly. And that's how much capitalism is absolutely tainted the games industry. And it sucks. It absolutely sucks. I hate that about my fandom for this industry. You can tell how much I love games. I've done 80 episodes of this show. I've written a blog on this since 2001, technically. I love games. I've written 3 books about games. I've got a fourth coming late this year, early next year, probably. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating at times being into games, because you just see people getting screwed over all the time. That have worked hard, that believed in the work they were doing, believed in the company that they were working for. And the companies just continue to find ways to get rid of them, to try to operate on leaner budgets. And they're making so much money that go right into the pockets of their CEOs and their administration and their boards and the shareholders, but not the people actually making the games. They're the ones that are disposable. And it's crap. Absolute crap. And this industry will likely implode upon itself with these decisions. Because people, that's the thing. The people that make these games and the people that play these games, they live in a lower to middle class, primarily. And with continuing price hikes for online play and access to features, along with the sudden disappearance of employment that continually is happening across any aspect of the game industry. Media, marketing, PR, production, it's all gone. It's all vanishing, disappearing, because companies seemingly cannot sustain themselves in this industry as it sits, because there's not enough money, but yet there is. It's just not going to the places that need it. So this kind of turned into a rant, but honestly, it needed to be. I need to critique this passion of mine just as much as I need to enjoy it and embrace it and love it, because it's problematic. It's got a lot of issues. And while I talk about the gender dynamic in games quite a bit in my books and on here and on my blog, there's so much more that's going on that is worrisome, that's troublesome, that is just wrong. And I hope at some point we could course correct. We can get rid of players that are human rights violators and just get them out of here at all levels. We can get rid of misogynists. We can get rid of sexual abusers. We can get rid of racists. We can get rid of homophobic people, transphobic people. Just get them out of the industry. We can have an inclusive, equitable, delightful, fair games industry. But we don't. And until we actually take companies into account, we never will. Pretty solemn episode, but that's what my thoughts are on Sony and Embracer Group. And I felt like I needed to just get some of that out. One last tangent, because I was tempted to write something about this, but, you know, I'm recording and I'm ranting about companies that are problematic. My favorite game is made by one of these problematic companies that had huge sexual abuse allegations. Racist abuse allegations running through it that have really not been taken care of. And that's Ubisoft. And the game is Beyond Good and Evil. The game that stands against everything that Ubisoft has become, which I have written about, and I'll link it below. Apparently, they just got a 20th anniversary edition of the original game rated by the ESRB. So it's coming back out. And I cannot permit myself to buy it from Ubisoft directly. I just can't. And it's probably a digital only thing. So I'll never own it. I will never own my favorite game on a modern platform because Ubisoft is a terrible company that continues to do terrible things and is run by a terrible person, controlled by a terrible board of directors that have allowed abusers to stay on staff and employees to continue to be abused. Cannot, will not. If I can find a physical copy used or in a way that I will not fork over any actual currency to Ubisoft, I might do that. That will be the one thing of Ubisoft I will work around to actually have, because I love that game and the messaging in it is important because it does go against what is current corporate crappy Ubisoft. But I cannot give them money for it. And when the sequel materializes beyond this abstract, missing the point entirely prequel that continues to lose staff because it's taking forever to become something that it will never reach because it's not going to be a game the way that it was envisioned. It cannot. It's not possible. I will not touch it. I refuse to play Beyond Good and Evil 2 at this stage. There's no reason. It's not the game it should have been. It is not addressing the things that the original pitch proposed to address. It is not following the story of Jade any longer. She is a side character in her own franchise. So that we can have an open world, open exploration, open, unique protagonist game that is too grandiose for Ubisoft to make happen. The director died this year. And Cell has been gone for 2 years following allegations around him. I don't see Beyond Good and Evil 2 being a thing ever again. If it does, I will not care because I cannot support this company. And it's been built under very widely known circumstances about Ubisoft's corporate culture. Toxic corporate culture, may I add. I don't know about 2001 to 2004 Ubisoft. I don't know. I don't know if it was bad then. Probably. But the game that was made back then, Beyond Good and Evil, it challenges, it dares, it counters everything that Ubisoft now stands for. And I will always believe that. And that is the only thing that I can get behind. There's apparently a Netflix show too. But who cares? It's modern Ubisoft. They're gonna lose the point of what made Beyond Good and Evil good. They don't care. So I will, if a physical version exists of the 20th anniversary edition, whenever it's announced, I will get around paying Ubisoft for it, and I will check it out. But if it's digital only, I will never buy it. I refuse. No way. No how. Not happening. If Beyond Good and Evil 2 or Beyond Good and Evil Netflix happen, I won't care. Because I cannot support that company anymore. I just cannot do it. And that's, there's lines in the sand all over the place in this industry now. I don't support Embracer Group. I cut out buying limited run game stuff. Dark Horse hasn't printed anything of Nintendo's in a long time, so that's been an easy one to ignore. But if they did, I'd probably ignore it, which means Splatoon 3 art book, oh well, guess I'm ordering it from Japan. Which has basically become a big thing for me, is going around limited run games. I bought River City Girls 2 from Japan because I didn't want to support limited run games, because it supports Embracer Group. SNK is hard. SNK is the hardest one because I know how much they're owned by Savvy Games Group. I know how much of a foothold that company is under. And it's starting to show more. There was a talk recently that somebody at SNK higher up said that they need to be making games that make Savvy money. And it's like, it's getting hard. It's getting hard to support SNK, and it sucks because I like SNK a lot. They're honestly overall one of my favorite game devs. I love King of Fighters. I love a lot of the Fatal Fury franchise. I love Metal Slug, and I've been enjoying exploring a lot of their back catalog via the compilations and arcade archives and stuff like that. They've got such a cool underdog legacy that is really easy to support, and they managed to maintain that in this current new iteration. They're scrappy. I love that about SNK, but it's difficult to want to support a company backed so heavily by a walking human rights violation. So, yeah, this episode is a very real contemplation of what's going on. What the hell is going on with video games? Anyway, we're about a half hour. I think I'll leave it there. I've ranted enough. Thank you for joining me today. We'll talk about Street Fighter 6 next time. And be a little bit of a jollier episode on the whole, because I love Street Fighter 6. I'm very happy with it. So, until we meet again, friends, take care.